Hello, good, good time. Welcome to yet another episode of the Spectre of Anti-Blackness. I am your host once again, and the Spectre of Anti-Blackness. I went into detail a little bit more in the last episode about what this podcast really is. Um, And I think I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure I already also established what I mean when I say the specter of anti-blackness, which is more or less, just to recap, is like a looming feeling that, for me at least, is kind of just reoccurring in the media and entertainment that I consume in the Western world, whether that be strictly black media or white media or just media otherwise. That is what drove me to start the podcast, wanting to have dialogue about kind of the anti-blackness, but now it's also kind of tied into, um, looking at just black shows in general, or other black different media and that sort of thing, things that predominantly feature black people, by black people, that sort of thing, and kind of talking about that and stuff like that. So it's a little more than just the specter of anti-blackness, but I do like the title, so I'm gonna stick with it. So yeah. Anyway, today we are looking at episodes or chapters 3 and 4 of the Underground Railroad, which is a Amazon original by Barry Jenkins, who you may also know. I believe he did Moonlight. Pretty sure that was his. And also, If Bill Street Could Talk, which I haven't seen either of those. I saw bits and pieces of If Bill Street Could Talk when I was flying to Nigeria. My sister was watching it next to me. Um, but yeah, I haven't seen either of those. I'm sure they're good. And from what I saw, I think he implements some of the same stuff from those movies in this show. So, kind of just like his directorial style. But at any rate, let's go ahead and transition and hop into the actual. Let's look at episode or chapter 3. All right, so chapter 3 is entitled North Carolina, and it has our heroine Cora traveling further north this time to North Carolina. Kind of self-explanatory there. Um, North Carolina, at least compared to Chapter 2, South Carolina, um, it's not as well. I'll say that I think it's more like character focused and plot driven. Um, there's not a lot of like metatextual elements and like allegory and that sort of thing that we saw in South Carolina. I'm not really picking up on any very large themes in North Carolina. Um, they go to a very religious town, and in the entire state of North Carolina, apparently black people have just been outlawed, just in general, as slave or otherwise, enslaved or otherwise. And in the beginning, the railroad guy, like the white guy who helps him, the abolitionist, I guess. Um, he makes this comment like, "Oh, the brutality that that man can do when he believes he is just." Which, sure, there's some elements of that in this episode, but that's also in every episode. So I wasn't really getting like this big thematic, idea. I couldn't really see a lot of today in this episode, and maybe that's because I'm not uh very well versed in Christianity, because it's got like these heavy, I don't know, they're maybe Mormon or something. I'm not sure. Uh, but yeah, I didn't really get much of that. Um, I do know that this part, my mother read the book. This is based on a book, if you didn't know. My mother read the book, and I remember discussing this episode with her. And this is also a thing that happened in the book, but it happened differently in the book. Um, there were some parts that they cut out in the show, particularly the um, the guy who's helping Cora, and there's another girl in there, a little girl whose name is Grace. It's a young girl, and he is raping her, if I'm not mistaken. That's completely cut from the show. It's not even implied, so I don't think it's like a subtle thing. She does say that she hates all of them, but she doesn't really give any reason as to why, anything indicating of that anyway. Um, but if that was in there, which I'm not saying I wanted it to be or anything, but I would see like a thematic cohesion with like even the people who are trying to help them. I don't know, they're like still like they're trying to be helpful in their own ways, but they're still very not like good. His wife is pretty terrible. Um, Even though, she sees herself, doing good. And I suppose in some sense of the way she is, but she's not like completely morally absolved of, she's still doing bad stuff. I think this episode serves to kind of just propel the plot forward in this episode. Spoilers. We do have Cora at the end is captured by the guy who was chasing her, and I swear every time I watch this show, I can never remember his name. I don't know why, but the guy who's been after her does finally catch her, and we see a little bit of that. Homer once again was instrumental in sussing her out, like he was in South Carolina. It's not time to talk about Homer yet. We will talk about him, but we see a little bit more of him and his unwavering dedication to the what is this guy's name? Hold on. Give me a second here. Ridgeway. Ridgeway? He's called Ridgeway apparently. Um, so yeah, his unwavering dedication to Ridgeway, and we see a bit more of that here. Um, Cora is captured, and we see her in the back of a carriage with another seemingly captured, previously enslaved man. Um, who he doesn't say anything, but he'll become important later. And we also, for the first time, see one of the guys who is not Homer that work with Ridgeway. And up until this point, we didn't even know there was anyone else. At least I don't think. It's my first time seeing him, or at least understanding what he does and where he's at and that sort of thing. Um, so a lot of things being set up for future episodes. Um, but personally, in my eyes, it doesn't really stand as the other ones do in that same sort of way of like, that real deep thematic cohesion with like the current day allegory and all that sort of thing. It is still a good episode though. I do enjoy it, and again, it's book stuff, so I guess they had to have it because that's just how the story goes, and it's important. But yeah, honestly, not much to say about this one. I can't even believe I stretched that out over 6 minutes. That's kind of crazy. But yeah, I know I said I was going to do this like daily, release one episode a day, sort of thing. I'm not doing that, obviously. I'm gonna do 2 episodes a week. On Monday, I watch an episode and record. On Tuesday, I will watch an episode, record, upload. So then, it'll be like a Tuesday every week. There's 10 episodes. It'll be about a month and a week of doing this, 5 weeks. Um, but yeah, the everyday thing was just a little too ambitious considering everything else that I got going on these days. And it also gives a little bit more. I don't want this to be a daily podcast. That's too much. But it also gives me more time to think about what I'm going to do after this. I know I have other things in the oven. I'm not sure exactly what's going to come next. But I do feel like I'm getting kind of better with this speaking thing. It does suck that I still don't have anyone here to dialogue with, that I'm just, you know, speeching it up, monologuing it, or what's the other word for that? Um, there's a monologue and then there's like a I can't remember. I'll come back to that. But yeah, stay tuned for episode 4. That's the one I'll be watching tomorrow. Well, and in like 10 seconds for you guys, but for me tomorrow. Okay, and we are back from the short break. And there's been a lot of twists. I just finished episode 4. A lot of twists happened seemingly overnight. For one, there was a twist in the show. We went back in time. We're not focusing on the main character, we're focusing on the villain of the story. The title of the chapter of the episode isn't a place. And we have a guest. We have a special guest speaker on the cast today.
Some people.
Why don't you go ahead and say hi?
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Just making sure. No, I can't hear you.
What do you mean I wasn't saying anything?
Oh, okay. Thought it cut out.
Yeah. You can hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. So, yes, lots of twists going on, and so I hear that you're a big fan of the podcast.
I am. I enjoy it very much. I appreciate.
Okay, glad to hear
content.
that. I'm glad we could get you on. You were the winner of a contest, I believe. As a longtime viewer, and
What?
you,
Right.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, I've been like pining over this. I'm so happy that I'm on the show. Thank you for having me.
Are you nervous at all?
I am. Yeah.
Fine. I mean that makes sense, you know, in the podcast and the cast biz, as we in the biz call it. It's completely normal to be nervous the kind of, you know, the first time. So don't even worry about that. Just it comes and it goes. Anyway.
Yeah.
So do you, before we get started on the episode, which you just watched it too, right? Do you have anything to say about the podcast in general, or just this series in particular, this mini-series about the Underground Railroad, or anything like that?
For the series, I would say I've watched it before. So this is my second go around, and it's a lot more difficult to watch this time around, which I think is interesting. But overall, I love the series. About the podcast, not in particular. No, I like where it's going.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Quick question. You said it's a little bit more difficult to watch this time around, and what makes you say that? What's more difficult about it?
I haven't been able to like put my finger on it, honestly. I don't know if it's just, so I'm having or I'm feeling more connected to music lately, and I think just like the music and the visuals and everything, it's just a lot more impactful this time around. Not to say that it wasn't the first time either, but I feel like I'm having a more like encompassing experience, I guess, which makes it difficult sometimes.
All right. Now I was able to talk to you a little bit before the show, and I remember hearing you had some notes about some things that you thought I missed out on in previous episodes.
Yeah. Let me try and recollect. So I think it was you didn't really talk about Cora's mom, Mabel is her name, and then Caesar, really. And I know like you didn't want to like you want to do broad strokes and stuff, but I think especially Mabel, she's incredibly important, and she's kind of like present throughout all the episodes. as Korra goes through everything and like it kind of does full circle. And then for the with Caesar, I don't know. I just feel like half that second episode was about him or like was him with him.
Sure.
Um, and it's not that I necessarily have like a whole lot to say about him. I just think like it's it's maybe like the first time you see like how yeah like how you kind of said how men are being like demasculinized, however you say that word, uh, and just like the I guess like young male perspective at that point in time. Um, but that's all I really have to say about those two things. Where'd you go?
Yeah. So,
Oh, okay.
oh, sorry. Could you not?
No, I couldn't. Did you just say
Oh, okay.
something?
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me still?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what that was about. Yeah. Technical difficulties happen sometimes when you got more people on the cast. I guess that's a
Part
you
of the
know
biz.
that's part of the cast biz.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, I did neglect to mention Caesar much in the as much as I wanted to in the second chapter of the first episode. I when I first went through and recorded it, I spoke a lot more about him, um, but it felt like a little too lengthy and a little unwieldy, and I was kind of going like part by part, like oh, Corey's over here doing this and Caesar's over there doing that, and that
Oh,
sort of
okay.
thing, and it felt more like a play by play in that sort of way, which I didn't want. But I can go back and talk about some. I didn't mention him at all in the first episode, I don't think. And also, I did not speak about Mabel either. Um, so I will say for me, Mabel feels representative of, well, for one, I would say home for Cora, with like the okra and the okra seeds. Um, which is not really explored too much in the show as it is in the books, I think. And are you a book? You're a book expert, right? You lengthily read the books, or
I haven't read this book though. I read
oh, okay,
books,
you
but I
you
haven't
didn't
read
read the
this
book.
book. No,
You're
it's on
a
the list.
you're what a slave historian or
No, not
no?
that.
Oh,
No.
okay. Um, huh? Why did we get you on the? Why did we get her on the show?
I.
Anyway, kidding, obviously. Um, but yeah, so I feel like not only does she represent like just home in a general term, but I feel like her mom Mabel is representative of Africa and like roots and that sort of thing. Um, but I don't really have much to say about her until the end of the series when it kind of comes,
Right.
as you said, full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as we know about her so far, she escaped, she ran away without her daughter Cora, and she's the only one to have escaped the pursuit of Ridgeway, which I know his name now because I looked it up.
Ridgeway.
Yeah, right. Isn't that like? Do they ever even say that in the
No
show?
one
I'm
ever
not
calls him
sure.
that. Like.
No one, no one calls him anything, which is I always forget his name, but
Yeah.
I do know it now. I think I've committed it to memory finally.
Okay.
Um, the one thing that I want to add about Caesar, which I told you a little about, was in the first episode. I believe the line he said was, "I will not be bred like cattle," um, which I thought was like very cool and powerful and important and integral line. Um, not only important for like life back then when you had like the different the breeding plantations and all of these things that the people had to go through, the enslaved folks, where they'd have to
Yeah.
have sex with people they didn't want to. We could just leave it at that without getting into the real
Mm-hmm.
depths of the trauma that was placed on them.
But even in today's society, I feel like there are still, it's still kind of reminiscent of that same.
Oh, I think you cut out again.
Oh, damn, why does it keep doing that? What's the last thing you heard? I'm sorry.
Reminiscent of that same ...
Oh, damn, what was I saying? It's essentially the same sort of feeling in our society today. With personally, at least, I think about the porn industry for one, and kind of like this way that sex is related to, and just in general, the emasculation is one of the words, or demasculinization is also a word. I think those mean the same thing. Of the black man. But yeah, that's all I really had to say about Caesar, honestly. I mean, I know you think he's a really big part of the show.
I wouldn't say like the series as a whole, but just that episode, like it was intentional that he took up so much of that space.
For sure.
But over the series, or the course of the series, yeah, he becomes, I don't want to say less important, but things shift.
Less significant. I mean, it's 10 episodes, he's in 2 of them. So I mean, it is heavily implied or even stated, I think, in later episodes that he dies terribly. But anyway, so let's go ahead and let's get into the episode. Well, first, right before we do that, I release these episodes in joints of 2. I will do, as you've seen, I'm sure, episode 1 and 2, and then, now I'm going to do 3 and 4, which means you have not yet heard my thoughts about chapter 3. Right. So what are your thoughts about it? I've already stated mine. You haven't heard them. Sorry. But go ahead and...
I don't like that, but okay. Episode 3, that's North Carolina, yeah?
Yes. You just watched it today, right?
Yeah, I just watched it. Let me think. So I only have like a few things, I guess, that were noticed by me.
Okay.
Overall, like the whole episode just felt like it was about like I don't want to be crass, but like just the impact of white women. It felt very like white women centered.
Okay.
And just like what their like fear and insecurity does, brings out, or whatever. Sorry, no cussing.
That happens sometimes. Fuck, I don't know.
And then it's a little thing, and I don't know if it continues throughout all of the episodes, but Homer's always the one to catch Cora or like, spot her.
He is.
Which is I don't quite get, I can't connect the dots like fully yet, but I just noticed that it's always like him and her, or has been so far.
I feel like a possible maybe not explanation, but maybe idea behind it.
Sure.
And maybe not a very good one. I don't know, like he's a kid, maybe he thinks like a kid, or something about gotta use a black person to catch a black person. I mean, I don't know. But he he seems pretty intelligent for his
right, yeah,
for his age. However, sorry, go ahead.
I'll save it because it has to do with the 4th episode too, so you can go first.
Oh no, go ahead. No, it's well, all I was gonna say was just I don't think it's personally, I don't think it's quite time to talk about Homer yet. I think I want to also save that for the last episode.
I want to talk about Homer. Okay, then I'll just briefly mention it. I won't get into it, I guess. But like the fourth episode, we're following Ridgeway. Yeah.
Yes.
And he's like searching for this great spirit. It's like this thing he can't connect to. He doesn't understand it. And I don't remember what I thought the first time I watched it, but I wrote or I was thinking, is like Korra the Great Spirit, but then I was thinking, is Homer the Great Spirit? Or like, this thing that he can grasp onto. And I'll leave it at that, I guess.
Well, that's a good segue anyway into chapter 4, which is indeed titled "The Great Spirit."
Mm-hmm.
Now we start off this episode with our friend, or if we can call him that, Ridgeway, kind of grasping with this idea of his father instilled in him this belief of what the titular the Great Spirit, right? Which in my understanding is basically just God.
Mm-hmm.
And we see him at his mother's grave, and he's like having a really hard time connecting, and he's like, I feel like he makes a lot of different errors, which are very common. Ridgeway, being a Western man, has a lot of belief, as he's talking to his dad at one point, and things that are physical. He's like, if I can't see it, how do I know it's real? And his dad's like, oh, you got to feel it. And then he's like, I feel like he's relating to even feeling the wrong way, because when he says you got to feel it, maybe he's thinking like, oh, sensationally, like, it's a feeling you get in your body somewhere, and not really feeling on like this deeper level. What his dilemma here, it humanizes him, at least for me, because his dilemmas are really, it's a true dilemma where it's like, you're searching for this thing, especially when we're talking about these spiritual aspects, when we're talking about God and that sort of thing. And it's like, what if it's not there? What if I really can't connect? What if I'm doomed in this sort of way? I think that's a really real dilemma.
For sure. Like, as I was watching it, I was like, for like a brief minute, I was thinking about like when I was like an atheist, essentially, and like the pipeline from like atheist to agnostic to like believing in God. And yeah, I think it's especially like he's depicted as maybe like a 19-year-old twin. I don't know how old he is.
He's young, that young, probably.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the point in time in which you kind of start contemplating that, at least from who I've talked to in my own experience. Kind of makes sense that, yeah, he's trying to figure that out, and is kind of frustrated, I guess, when everyone else kind of seems to have it down, I guess. I don't know.
Just a quick tangent here. I do want to shout out Barry Jenkins, because I believe this flashback episode is not included in the books.
Really?
Yeah, I think this is. I think he just made this up. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that to be true.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into that.
Oh, there's I was not just shot. I believe that was a firework outside.
Okay.
I guess they're celebrating Tuesdays. I don't know.
Gotta celebrate Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, anyway. So yeah, I remember the first time I watched this episode or this series, and I was speaking with my brother. He put a lot of the blame on Ridgeway's father, feeling like he kind of didn't do enough, like he wasn't able to raise his son in the correct way, which is it's a point I can kind of like. I don't feel like his father was perfect, but at the same time, I feel like he did the best that he could with his means and in his situation. And he even mentions at one point in the episode that basically says, I don't think I'm his teacher, and being a parent isn't the same as being a teacher,
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Excuse you. So yeah, that's so we follow Ridgeway. You know, he's having these issues with the Great Spirit. He pushes a kid down a well. He basically in the episode, what we see is for one, I feel like Ridgeway stands for a lot. You know, um, he's a lot more than just like one random guy. He makes this speech. It's not quite the speech that he has in a later episode, which I feel like kind of just epitomizes the entire ideology of American of the West in general. But he does like have this ideology, which I think was prevalent during the time. I don't know how prevalent it is now, but it is. It rings true for a lot of people in that way of thinking, where he's basically like, you know, if you're supposed to be free, then you're free, and then if you're not, you know, then maybe you weren't supposed to be or whatever. And kind of invoking this way of, oh, things are as God intended, you know.
Right. It's like I remember the speech you're talking about. It's like the predecessor to that Great Expansion. Is that what it's called? The Great Expansion? That's what I call
it. You were thinking of Manifest Destiny, I think.
Manifest Destiny. Yes, that. He was giving very much that in the episode and in later episodes.
Yeah, and yeah, he definitely gets more into that way for sure.
Yeah.
I also felt a lot of on the same level of not understanding how to quite relate to spirit. He also, in conjunction with that, feels very materialistic with the whole thing with the jackets. And he's like, you know, he's like, hey, Dad, I got this jacket for you. And he's like, I have a jacket. Like, you know, his dad's
like, you have two coats. That's so sick. Good job. Anyways.
That's lit. You bought two of the same jacket. That's pretty cool.
Wow, look at you.
But yeah, he's got this. He's buying into this materialistic worldview, common in the West, and I feel like that only serves to further perpetuate this this emptiness that he feels when trying to connect with anything spiritual, because he's in a very materialistic way of approaching things, and that's another concept that's seen a lot in our society today. With a lot of people who get like rich and famous and they still feel just as empty, if not more empty, than when they weren't rich and famous. At one point, you know, eventually they realize happiness isn't in this material stuff. Fulfillment isn't in all that. The age-old adage that money can't buy you happiness.
Yeah, you said it earlier, but the whole thing about like him maybe confusing Great Spirit being like this sensation that you feel in the body, and how things like consuming, like that people go through that all the time. Like they have buyer's highs, and it's this thing that they can't help but go after. I mean, we're all complicit, I guess. But how are we all complicit?
Yes.
I don't know. Everyone buys stuff. And I feel like even if it's stuff you need, it feels good to like be able to buy the things that you need. Like, I'm not saying the sensation itself is bad, but the level in which people worship it. I'm not saying like us or everyone, but yeah, it's a real thing. Like people worship, you know, money and whatever, physical things, external things. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's do you have anything else to say about episode or chapter 4, The Great Spirit?
Not really. It was spooky. That episode scares me a lot, honestly.
Yeah, I do know that the well part is a thing for you, right?
The well part, the part when it's like from the baby's perspective, when the dad gets caught, like that was like very intense. It does the audio thing where it gets like really loud and overwhelming. So yeah,
that Homer? I don't remember. I
think so,
right?
But
no?
I don't know, because I thought when I first saw him that it was, but then the other catcher, like he takes the baby, so I don't know if he gets him back. I don't remember what happens when it comes to that.
If I remember correctly, there's either a little bit more to this flashback story in another episode, like we see it again, or he just talks about it at length. Because I'm pretty sure he does explain how Homer comes into a service, which is actually another. Again, I'm not talking about Homer yet, but I do. His relationship, Ridgway's relationship with Homer, is an interesting one because he's shown in this episode to be completely devoid of empathy for Black people, which I'm sure it was a common thing for people back then with all of the propaganda and just the situation in general. But somehow he ends up with this little Black kid in his service who he seems to
he takes care of him.
Care deeply for. He takes care of him and he respects him in some sort of way.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting.
So yeah, that's something worth looking at once we get there. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about episode 4.
Yeah, me too.
No further comments. Nothing else you'd like to talk about before we wrap this up?
I will say this isn't really like an analysis or a comment on the show itself, but I accidentally started with the 10th episode because I didn't like look at the episodes because I thought it would just start with number 1. So I saw like a little bit of the 10th episode, which is like a very interesting thing to come into the series again, knowing like the first 10 minutes at least of the last episode.
Oh, you watched 10 minutes and you're like, oh, this is the wrong. I'm at the wrong.
Yeah, I was like, wrong episode. But it does like, because the first episode does the flashback thing. I was like, okay, I'll just go along for the ride.
Oh, and then you're like, oh, wait, this isn't a flashback.
This is a really long flashback. Wait a minute.
It's a really long, continuous. This is like a story, actually.
But that was
understandable.
Funny. Yeah.
All right. So this is. Do you have any? I've seen a podcast or two where they talk about things that they're watching at the end, or they do plugs as they want people to find them on social medias and stuff. Do you got anything like that you want to tell the people?
No, I don't really use socials, and I'm not watching anything of note. I'm watching Legend of Korra. Like that's it.
Ooh, and for that, I'm gonna have to kick you off the show.
No. Listen, whatever. We'll talk about it off the podcast. Don't come for Legend of Korra.
Wow. Yep. That's yeah. Okay. That's a point of contention for sure. But this is not a podcast about that subpar show. This is a podcast about a very great show. And so let's go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks for joining. I'm gonna say my thing that I always say at the end. You can also add on if you can think of a thing to stay. I hope you viewers of the show stay properly hydrated today. That you don't feel like you don't get cracked lips because you're thirsty and you're like, damn, I want some water. I hope you stay properly hydrated today.
And I hope that you are able to sit in the sun for like at least like a minute today. Just like chill out in the sun. Get
good.
that vitamin D. It's very important. And spring is coming, so everything is really pretty outside.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
No, thanks for that. All right, this has been my my guest star for the day. Go ahead and thanks for coming in. We appreciate.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for participating in whatever it was that got you on here.
Mm-hmm.
I have to talk to my producers about that. I'm not sure how you got in here, but at any rate, keep listening, keep checking out the podcast. If you like, or if you don't like it, delete it, I guess. And I'll see all of you in the next. Or I won't see, but you'll hear me. Same time next week. Goodbye.
Bye.